Today I'm going to walk you through how I would write a story, whether that's a short story or a full novel, using just chatbots. If I could only have access to chatbots and none of these other specialized tools or automations that people talk about, if all I had was ChatGPT or Claude or Perplexity, what would I do and how would I do it? So in this video, we're going to break that down by my exact process that I would go through and the process that I am actually going through to write a short story in my live streams. So check out my live streams for more on that. But we're going to just walk through that process and get through it. Now, if you're unfamiliar with this channel, my name is Jason. I teach authors how to write using AI tools, but in a way that doesn't sabotage their own creativity and ethics. I wrote 14 books the traditional way, and I am absolutely obsessed with storytelling, but also kind of obsessed with the technology that we have at our fingertips to do things that we could have never done before. So if we switch to my screen here, you can see I've got here a Google Doc that I call my writing process. This is a list of prompts that is essentially how I write these days. Now, there's certainly plenty of ways that you can write, plenty of different prompts to go through that process, but this has now become kind of a definitive process for me that I can do for most of my books, as well as short stories and novellas. It works no matter what. And the first part, I'm just going to walk you through this document, and if you want, you can get this document yourself by joining one of my two groups. The silver group will have it, but the silver group's really just if you want to dip your toe in a little bit and see what I've got and see if it's right for you. The gold group is really the one that you want to join if you want to get hands-on assistance with this and writing your books. My goal is to get people to 20 books as quickly as possible. I'm about to start a challenge to write 20 books in 1 year because I know that can be done. In fact, with the process I'm going to show you today, you could potentially even do a book in a week while still having it be a good quality thing that matches your vision. So in this case, I'll walk you through this process really briefly. You can come and get this document on your own. So the first thing I do is I start brainstorming. Now, I usually like, if I'm writing a book, I usually like to write in a series. So I will start by brainstorming where the series is going as a whole before you even start on book one. But if you're not planning on doing that, if you want to write a standalone or whatever the case is, you don't have to start by brainstorming a series, but you will need a brainstorming document of some kind. So I do have a system prompt here that you can use to get you started. But really, this is the most imprecise part of my process because I will typically not use any particular set of prompts. More of it is just a back and forth conversation with the AI to get a basic, maybe 2 or 3 paragraph synopsis of each book that I'm happy with. And I also like to make a list of what I just call a list of things that need to happen, right, in the book. And a lot of that's just my own brainstorming, putting it down there. I'll make a list of characters that I know of, anything that I already have an intuitive sense for. And one of the things I like to do at this part of the process is actually give it what I've put down and have the AI actually ask me questions, because usually it's able to analyze things and come up with some good ideas for questions that the AI might have for you. Because let's face it, we in our brainstorming process don't always think through everything, but when asked a question, we often have a good idea of the answer to that question. And I find myself all the time just being like, oh yeah, we should definitely put that in there. So I'll have the AI ask me questions. One of the things that I like to do at this stage of the process that's really helpful, especially if you are using chatbots, is using a different type of advanced voice mode. Now, most chatbots have a version of this now. I'm using Perplexity here, and the advanced voice mode is right here. I just click on this, and now I can just have a conversation with the AI. And you'll find this with ChatGPT. I know Grok has one. A lot of them have them. Some of them are available inside of the desktop version, or rather the online web version, and some don't. Gemini, for example, is usually more accessible inside of the Gemini app rather than the online chatbot version. So the one I typically go to is the one in Perplexity, because if you've been following this channel for the last little bit, you'll know that Perplexity has kind of become my favorite chatbot. So you can find that just right here. So that's the brainstorming process. A little bit more imprecise, but generally what I end up with is I just have a list of everything that's going to happen, just a brief 2 to 3 paragraph synopsis of every book in the series, if I'm doing a series. as well as a list of all major characters and world building ideas and other conceptual ideas that I just want to jot down that I want to make sure happen in the book. Next goes to the next step, which is the outlining and the pre-writing work. So I define pre-writing as basically locking down all of those characters and world building elements. Anything setting or character related, we want to make sure is in there. So I have a multi-step process for this. And keep in mind that at every step of this process, you need to be going through and kind of validating the work that AI does for you to make sure it fits with your vision. Otherwise, you're going to get a lot of things that don't fit with your vision get carried through to later stages where it will be more difficult to edit them out. So the first thing I like to do is what I just call a call sheet. So I have a prompt here that all it does is it takes all of your information and it takes the list of genre tropes for the genre that you're writing in, and it writes a call sheet. And by this, I mean, it makes a list of every single character and or world building element that it needs to write this book. And I try to have it really try and give me specifics for things that might not have been in the brainstorming document or the synopsis. But if it determines that we need like a bunch of side characters, it'll create those and give them names and everything. But I want to take this opportunity to show off the structure of how I do these prompts. Because it's going to be important if you want to use this for a chatbot. The first thing is, notice these little tags here. I'll zoom in just a little bit more. You can see I have, this is called an XML tag, where it has these two little brackets on either side. And then there's another one here, but this one has a /. These are called XML tags. If you're familiar with HTML, this will look familiar to you. But what this does is it essentially breaks things down into easy to understand little boxes for the LLM. And this is how you handle large amounts of context. So you may have heard the term context engineering. It's actually kind of more important than prompt engineering. It's making sure that the AI has all of the context that it needs to be able to write your book properly. So in this case, you could just put all of that entire brain dump info that we made in the last step and just stick it here between these two XML tags. This just kind of helps AI to keep track of what is what in its context. And then you do the same thing with the list of tropes for your genre. Now, I plan on doing some deeper dives on genres in the future, but basically if you want, it's easy enough to get AI to give you a list of tropes for any particular genre. It's important that you do your research on this, because more likely than not, with people who have well-written series that fail, it often has to do with not identifying the genre correctly. And so you want to make sure that you have done so and done some research, and that you include those tropes, the general tropes from the genre, in this section. And then we have another XML tag here called instructions. And in this case, this is the bulk of the prompt that I have it go through. Now, this is what I would change if we were doing this in a chatbot. So you could take this whole thing, paste in your brain dump info here, paste in your genre tropes here, and then take that entire massive prompt and pop it into a chatbot like Perplexity or ChatGPT or Claude or what have you. But the nice thing about chatbots is that they have this feature called projects. In Claude, it's called projects. In ChatGPT, it's called projects. In Perplexity, it's called spaces. But you'll see something similar in pretty much all chatbots have this. So in Perplexity, I go here to spaces, and I go here to create a new one. So create new space here up in the top left, and I can name this space something like call sheet creator. And then here's the key point. All of this context, you want to look for anything that will be something you want the AI to understand for multiple chats. So anything that's not going to be different every time you chat with it. So for instance, the genre tropes. This is definitely something that you're going to want to have around most of the time, right? You're going to want to have this information available. And so you don't want to be copying and pasting the genre tropes into every chat where you're running this prompt, right? You just want it to know what that stuff is and just have it available to it, you know, however you want to do it. So in a project, you can come here to add instructions. Oh, that's not quite the right thing. You go here to add files, excuse me. Select local files, and then you can create a TXT file or something like that and upload it so it has that. And you can call it genre tropes, you can call it whatever you want. And then you can even take some of the instructions part of it right here and say, given the above brain dump information and genre tropes, I want you to create a pre-writing call sheet that has a list of everything the author will need to fully flesh out the characters. So if we've got a project here, or a space in the case of Perplexity, that is specifically designed to create call sheets, then we can take these instructions and just put them in the general instructions part of this project. Now you are going to need to tweak this a little bit so that it can be used for multiple brain dump instances. So instead of given the above brain dump, you can say, given the brain dump information that the user will provide and genre tropes, because remember, we can take the genre tropes and upload those as a single file. Then we go to the next part. I want you to create a pre-writing call sheet that has a list of everything the author will need to fully flesh out the character's world building and outline for, and then here's another tweak that you would need to make it work more generally. The book that the user is trying to write. Okay. Here's what you should include. And then it gives characters, world building, and outline info. And then we just hit save. Now, all I have to do, because if I've uploaded a file that has the genre tropes, if I have made the instructions part of the instructions here, all I have to do is grab that brain dump file here. I don't even need to give it instructions. I could just grab the brain dump file and just paste it in here and let it go. And it should be able to create the call sheet, right? So let's actually see what this looks like. So I have a series outline here for some novellas. All I have to do is just paste this, because I've already put the instructions here. Paste this in here. And since I'm in Perplexity, I can also choose which model I want to use. But if you're in Claude, you'd have to use one of the Claude models. If you're in ChatGPT, you have to use one of the ChatGPT models. I'm just going to select Claude Sonnet 4 for this, and just paste in the brain dump thing, and then boom, it will actually start to create the call sheet because it already has the instructions set. So now I can go and take any brain dump document that I have, stick it in here, and it should be able to create that call sheet. So this is kind of how I want you to think when using a chatbot to write your story. You want to create multiple projects for each step of this process that you can then reuse over and over and over again. Now, I know I'm going to get some questions about how do I do this if you want to have everything in one chat. So a lot of people really like to have all of their book in one chat, basically, so that it can remember everything that's come before. But there is a problem with this. The main problem is that go long enough and it's going to forget things that's happened in the past. And also, even if it doesn't forget things, you're watering down your prompt with too much stuff that might not be relevant to the project at hand. I also find that I don't like to use one chat for everything, because inevitably, while I'm in that chat, I will come up with ideas, or I will negate ideas that I actually don't want it to use in the final product. And it's going to be remembering things that I actually don't want. Even if I correct it somewhere in the chat, it might get it wrong and use the wrong thing rather than the correct thing. So like maybe I changed the name of a character partway through, and sometimes it gets it right, but sometimes it gives you the previous incorrect name of the character, that sort of thing. So I tend to create a new chat for each step of the process. And I create a new chat, like once I'm to the prose writing stage, I will create a new chat for every chapter. Sometimes multiple chats per chapter, and then I will provide it with all of the context that it needs. And let's go back to our document here, and you can see what I mean. So back here in the document, I've pretty much covered the call sheet prompt in depth here, so I'm going to skip over a lot of the others, but I have a character prompt to get the context from the brain dump, the call sheet that we just created, the genre tropes, and then I have instructions to create more fleshed out characters for the story. I have a world building prompt here, which does the exact same thing, but for like world building elements and setting details. And then I have an outlining prompt, which takes all of that world building information, all of that character information, all of that brain dump information, all of the genre tropes, all of the, I also give it an outlining template. I have several. I have one for a full novel. I have one for a novella. I have one for a short story. You can come up with any outlining template that you want to use. You can have AI come up with an outlining template for you and just stick it in this part of the context. But that's a new thing that you'll need here. The ones that I have produced are called the plot module for a novel, short story, novella. They're all available inside of the groups that I've mentioned before. And then from here, it creates the full outline, but it requires a massive amount of context here. So once again, if you're doing this in one chat, you need to be providing it with all of that context. So I like to just take a lot of these things and make them specific documents that you can, that the chat can access. This is why I'll create a project. So anything that I might want to access in more than one chat, rather than having to copy and paste that context into every single chat, I can just put it inside of the project, and then any chat that's made within that project will have access to those things. So that's how I do this. We got as far as the outline here. Then I go through a process where I create a style sheet, where I give it a sample of my own text. And in the past, I've done anywhere from 2,000 to 6,000 words of my own text, and I give it this prompt to any LLM, but I kind of liked Opus for this, 4.1 Opus as of the time of this recording, where I'll give it my writing samples here in an XML box, and then say, given the above writing samples, I want you to draft a prose style sheet giving instructions on how to write like these samples, and even including small snippets from the samples as examples of your recommendations. This style sheet is intended for use by an LLM to write fiction in the same style. Make sure the style sheet emphasizes things like deep point of view and the show don't tell principle with examples from the samples. Do not focus on specific characters or other details from the samples. Just focus on the prose style. The style sheet should be thorough. So I have it create this style sheet because this is, again, another piece of context that we're going to want for later. And then we create something called the scene brief. So this is the step that comes right before we actually start writing the prose. This is where we take all of that context that we've been looking at so far and narrow it down to the specific details that we need for this specific scene that we're about to write. So I give it the full outline. I give it the characters. I give it the world building. I give it text from the previous chapter if relevant. So if I'm writing chapter 9, I want to give it the text from chapter 8, just so it understands where we left off, right? And then I give it the instructions to create the scene brief, which gives us not just what happens in the scene, but also details about the characters that might be a variation of the overall details that we have of them so far. Things like what they might be wearing in this particular scene, what their emotional mood is in this scene, that sort of thing. And then once we've got that, and by the way, I'm creating a new project for each of these. Each of these steps has its own kind of project where I'm able to take this super prompt and adapt it to work in a project setting so that I don't have to be copying and pasting all of this context every single time, right? Then we write the first draft. This is probably the most complex of all of them, and it's a massive, massive prompt. It will be a bit of an expensive prompt if you're not using a chatbot, if you're going through an API, depending on the expense of the model you're using. I typically, for this step, am currently using 4.1 Opus, which is not a cheap model, and I have found that it's very, very good, but also very expensive. This whole process costs me about $1 per chapter. But I will say that the quality is excellent and there's very little editing needed after the fact. But in this case, I give it a whole bunch of context. So I give it the prose style examples, and in the style sheet that we created earlier, I give it a list of forbidden words that I have, that you can also get access to inside of the two groups linked below. I give the full context, including the full outline, the character info, and the world building info. I give it the previous chapter text, if relevant, and the scene brief that we created in the last step, so it knows exactly what it should write for this chapter. And then the instructions. And once again, I can take all of this and just put it inside of a project and make that work. And I'll show you a little bit of what this would look like if I were using Claude instead of Perplexity. So inside of Claude, you can come over here to the left where it says projects and create a new project. And I could say like Prose Writer or Chapter Writer or something like that. Create project. And then from the instructions, first of all, I could give it the instructions that would just be an adaptation of these instructions right here, which this is a lot of instructions. So we'll see if it actually can take it all. Yes, it can. But then I need to tweak it to work in this context. So I say your task is to write the entire chapter that the user, well, I will say chapter based on the scene brief that the user will give you. So the scene brief is the thing that we're going to be popping in with each chat, with each chapter, because it's the only thing that changes from one chat to the next. But everything else we want to make sure we include in its context. So this should be pretty good here. So I would just save these instructions. And then over here on the right, you have files. So I would then go here, hit the plus button, say add text context. We could name the text context. So I could say, for instance, forbidden words list, and then paste in my list of words that I don't want the AI to use, that AI tends to overuse, right? And I could also do the same with all of these other bits of context that I want to be reused, right? So the things that can be reused in this context for this particular prompt are the prose style examples, the style sheet, the prohibited words. I can give it the full context, like the outline, the character, and the world building info. I can give it, well, the previous chapter text is going to vary. So this might be something I have to supply with each chat, along with the scene brief is also going to vary with each chat. So these are things that I will provide inside of the chat, but all of this can be provided just in these text contexts. So I could, I don't have the forbidden text on me at the moment, but I could just say testament. I don't like the word testament coming from an LLM, overused. You could use delve. You could use names like Lyra or Ilara, which I see a lot in fantasy, stuff like that, and just add the content. And now it knows this is a forbidden words list, right? So now when I write, it should lessen the amount that those words come up. And just as a side note, it doesn't eliminate them completely, but it does tend to use them less often. All right, back to the prompts list. So we've done the writing of the first draft here. And it's time to move on to what happens after that. So I have a light line editing prompt. This is not a really heavy editing prompt because frankly, AI is not great at editing, especially editing its own prose that it wrote. Even if you're using a different LLM, it tends to struggle to edit itself. But I do have a light line editing prompt that is a two-part prompt. The first one is step one, getting the improvement plan. So I give it all of the context again, previous chapter text, the chapter, the scene brief that the chapter was based on, the prose style examples in the style sheet, the prohibited words. And then I have the instructions to basically make a plan to improve the text based on a lot of that context. And then the second step is all I do is I give it the original chapter that was written and the improvement plan that was created, and I have it implement the improvement plan. And this is a two-step process because AI is usually better at making a plan and then implementing than it is at doing it all at once. Just having that chance to reason first and then get into it is usually better. So that's why I do this as a two-part prompt. And that is essentially how it works. And if you want to see actual in real life examples of this in action, I am in the process of writing a novella using this method in my live streams. As I'm recording this, I haven't done one in a little while and won't do one again for at least 2 weeks because I'll be out of town. But in the future, all of my future live streams that I'll be doing at least once a week will be around this topic of writing an entire novella using these prompts in a chatbot so you can actually see it in action. And my plan is to do the entire process from start to finish. I've already done some of it in previous live streams, but I'm going to go through all the way to the end using the live streams and using these methods in a chatbot. So hopefully that'll be interesting to you, and you can follow along with that process. But if you'd like to go a little bit more hands-on, I would invite you to look at the Story Hacker Gold group, where our goal is to get you to writing at least a book a month, right? We have challenges every quarter to get you writing a book a month and realizing that it doesn't actually take as long as the lies that we've been fed by the traditional publishing agency, or the traditional publishing industry, pardon me, to thinking that it takes a year or two to actually write a solid book. It doesn't. It really doesn't. That is a limiting belief that we have been fed. And our goal is to break people of that limiting belief. And so we've got book in a month challenges. Right now, we're doing a challenge to write a short story without AI because we're very concerned about also improving our skills. And so we're not just using a calculator for all of our math. We are learning how to do the math without the calculator as well, because it can only help us. And so if you're interested in that, this is the place to go. I am also very heavily in this group. I make sure to answer any questions that are posed inside of the community here. There's tons of different courses here that you can check out, and live calls. If you look at the calendar, like these are all the live calls that we've got. Of course, if this is overwhelming, you don't have to go to all of these, but these are resources available to you in just about any area where you might need help in the book writing process. So if this is interesting to you, please go check it out, and I will see you in the next video.